Welcome to Chasing the Beats, a show dedicated to weeklybeats.com artists, their songs, and stories from the 2024 season. I'm your host, SQF, and our guest today is Neon Liminal. All right, well, welcome, Neon Liminal.
Hey, thanks. Good to be here. You can also call me Matt, by the way.
Okay, Matt. That seems very official. Well, stoked to have you on and chat about your music over Weekly Beats. Kind of how I start all of these was this your first Weekly Beats?
It was my first, yeah. Naturally, I got into it through the M8 because it seems like half the people did. My brother actually discovered it and linked me to it via, I guess, Trash 80. And he was already doing a weekly album project.
Oh.
And so he'd do like a short 5-track album in a week. And he's like, I think I can do this. And I was like, well, sure. I can probably do it too. And we did, which was good.
Yeah.
It was super fun.
And did you have an M8 before?
Yeah. So the M8 is kind of a funny, almost sad, but also good story. My brother got an M8 a couple of years before I got mine. But when my dog Rory was diagnosed with cancer for the first time back in 2023, I was suddenly like, wow, I'm going to be spending like hours in waiting rooms every week. I need something to do for music. So yeah, we got the M8 right then. And that was the start of like how the M8 can help me make music when I have like 2 or 3 minutes while I'm not doing something else or waiting for a pot to boil.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, so there's a lot of waiting room music in my repertoire.
Yeah, I mean, it is a wonderful device for on the go and filling in little bits of time for sure.
And it's so handheld. It's kind of ideal. There's other devices out there, but they don't quite have the same tactile sensation of, hey, I'm playing a video game, but also making serious music.
Exactly. Yeah, it does. It sounds better than what you think that it would produce.
Yeah. And the sound design potential is just crazy. That's kind of what I love about it. There's an infinite amount of modulation, which is something I always look for in the synthesizer, like very similar to like the Hydrasynth, how it's basically a modular synth inside of a box. The M8 has a lot of potential there as well. I'm still trying to push it to the point where it sounds M80 as opposed to like getting something different out of it. And I think I'm still pushing it. So it's good. I'm loving it.
You're trying to push it where it doesn't sound M80 or
no, I'm waiting for it to sound expected and it hasn't yet.
Okay.
You know, like a lot of synthesizers, especially ones that are tuned a particular way or curated a particular way, eventually take on a sound that is recognizable as them. And, you know, in some cases, this becomes iconic. Like the Moog synthesizers have that Moog sound with the Moog.
Or like a 303.
Yeah, a 303, obviously, you know, a legend. And so sometimes I kind of look for a synthesizer to sort of take on that character of its own. And like the M8 definitely has its own character, but I don't feel like it ever gets shoehorned into that space, at least. I haven't managed to do it yet. I'm trying, but...
Yeah, like listening back to my stuff from the year, it sort of sounds like M8 to me because I think I use a lot of the same presets, but that's just my lack of sound design prowess, but I'm getting better at it.
Just a random thing I discovered only recently, which has apparently been in the M8 for years, is the random feature.
Yes.
Oh my God.
So I have been, ever since the new FM engines got released, like a month ago, I've mostly been making noise, but I've just been like randomizing everything and being like, oh, that sounds kind of cool. Like, I haven't made any songs with it yet, but
I have. I started what I guess I'm going to call Spooky Season Volume 2.
Nice.
And I've been watching the Backrooms analog horror stuff on YouTube, which has got a lot of fluorescent tube buzzing and sort of
Ooh,
weird
yeah, yeah.
noises. So like I have a whole backrooms folder on the M8 now of sounds that are basically just noise, but it
Yeah.
sounds great. It's great. Just hit that random button and mess around.
Yeah, I definitely get those, yeah, buzzing electronics or idling engine far away,
Yeah.
or, you
Yeah.
know. So one day I will harness them. So what made you, actually wanna do the challenge this past year? Only because you just found out about it, or?
I've done similar kind of challenges before, but like I can't handle like January or November beat or whatever it is. Like I can't do it every day. I just don't have the schedule.
Yeah, yeah.
And a week felt like enough pressure to force me to learn how to do stuff quickly, but not so much pressure that I would be like, this is completely exhausting. I can't do this anymore. And it went pretty good. I have discovered that like a week is not quite enough time to execute a song on the M8 to where I feel like it's ready, but I can still get something that sounds good.
Yeah.
I've also recently discovered that a month is too long. So we're aiming for 2 weeks now.
Yeah, what's too long about a month? Just not enough
I just end
pressure?
up like rabbit holing. Like I get
Yeah.
like stuck into like little things that ultimately should be done after the fact. Like there needs to be a point where the arrangement's solid, the sounds are solid, and like at that point it goes into Ableton, and then I finish the arrangement, I refine it, and it's just sort of like there's lots of great things the M8 does, but there's also things that a DAW does better. And so I think I need to sort of draw a line where I'm really trying to like refine, like an arrangement or a piece of the song to something that's sort of in my head that ultimately shouldn't be done on the M8. I need to
Yeah.
like take it somewhere else to finish it. So yeah, like a month is too long because I start rabbit holing on those sort of things and get distracted and should really just start a new song.
Yeah. What do you like to do in Ableton outside of the M8?
Everything like Ableton is like a tool like anything else. Like I've learned music from a lot of different contexts in terms of like making it, and I have different like modes of thinking and modes of approach that work well for my brain, and Ableton sort of encapsulates a lot of those. So for instance, like a lot of really like heavily composed orchestral stuff or like cinematic stuff, I find Ableton is really well suited for, in particular like the access to the instruments there, but also like with the M8, when you get a track and you render it into stems and pull into Ableton, then you can like chop up those stems so much more easily.
Got
You
it.
can sort of do it on the M8 by like, the quick render, which is really, really handy, but like having like a whole visual of the song and being able to like, cut out the kicks and the snares at a particular point, like just by dragging the mouse is really, really handy.
Yeah.
And then effects, like the M8 has good effects. It has really nice distortion. It's got some really good stuff, but in terms of sort of automating effects to create like, little crazy techno delay trails and risers and stuff,
Mhm.
like Ableton's going to do an easier job for that. So it's just a
Yeah.
tool in the toolbox.
Yeah, I typically finish all my stuff in GarageBand,
Yep.
but I'm not doing I was doing a lot of EQ stuff before the EQ feature, but, I learned kind of early in the year that setting levels was, like, a very important part of the process. So I got this free plugin called Ulean Meter,
Yep. Yep.
Ulean Loudness Meter. So highly recommend that to anyone that struggles with their levels. So yeah, I probably need to get Ableton and just like try it out.
I like generally, I recommend people like try different DAWs and find the one with the workflow that works for you. Because it can really vary quite a bit. Like the Bitwig
Yeah.
workflow is very much different from the Ableton workflow. You've talked to people about Renoise, which is basically like a tracker and a DAW.
Mhm.
Tracker workflow is great in a handheld for me. I'm not sure I want to do it on a computer, but
Yeah.
we'll see. Maybe I'll get a good keyboard. Who knows? But yeah. And then, of course, Ableton for me is also like where I do all my mastering.
Yeah.
which I think is a really big, important thing. The feature of my weekly beats year was I mastered over 200 tracks.
Oh, wow.
Because I mastered all my weekly beats tracks. I mastered all my brother's weekly beats tracks, and then I mastered my brother's albums, and then I mastered my album.
Wow.
And so, 2024 was the year of like really getting mastering experience.
Yeah.
And that was like really, really good. It was hectic as hell, but I learned so much. I also learned the importance of reference tracks. Holy crap. Using reference tracks for mastering just changes everything. So yeah, it was a
As
good year for
far,
that.
what do you kind of pull from a reference track that helps you master?
Basically, the way I was taught is like, I'm not like a mastering engineer. I'm not an audio engineer.
Yeah.
I'm not a production expert. So chances are, if I can find a song that sounds like what I want my song to sound like, using that as a reference is a way better idea than trying to wing it.
Got it.
And there's usually stuff inside of a reference that you're not necessarily hearing that tools that use reference tracks can kind of decipher. And so basically, especially like when I was mastering someone else's work, I'd say, what do you want this to sound like? And they would provide me with like a track they wanted to sound like. And that sort of becomes the basis for like how the EQing is done, where the loudness levels are, which is sort of something you still have to tweak and adjust. But this kind of gives you like a baseline to work from. And that's incredibly valuable because if you're using, in particular, Isotope Ozone for mastering, which is a fantastic suite, its presets are super loud and super extreme, and it tends to just push you towards a preset as soon as it starts out, and not very useful. Like really loud, very,
So
very loud.
is that a plugin for Ableton or a
It is, yeah.
separate thing? Okay.
Yeah. Isotope makes a number of plugins, but their mastering suite is called Ozone, and it's really, really good. I think there's like a Ozone Essentials, like a free version you can try out, and then you can sort of
Okay.
upgrade as you like. But it's fantastic. It's really good.
Well,
I
kind
am
of in
plugging.
that same vein, you were just talking about how like a week is not long enough, and it feels like you do a ton of revisiting your weekly beats work and repackaging and remastering more so than I think anyone else that I've noticed.
Okay.
So I was kind of curious, uh, is it just like feeling like you want to put like the final polish on that stuff, or like one of the songs we're going to listen to, one of the spooky season songs, you sent me a version that we'll listen to that you said was like remarkably different from the
Yeah.
weekly beats version. So how do you approach going back and tweaking things but not going down this like perfectionist rabbit hole that sometimes feels like you're making it worse?
It's all intent. So like if I'm revisiting a track, it's going to be for either like an album or for a project I'm working on. Like I don't just randomly pick tracks and think, hey, I could make this better, because that's a trap right there, right?
But
So
yeah,
no,
what's different about like, oh, I'm gonna make these songs into an album? Like, how do you avoid the trap in that scenario?
well, like first of all, like I'll have an idea for the album that I want to make. And so like the first album I put out, Autumn on Ganymede, was several years in the making, but it was these sort of like ambient space music kind of tracks. And there was a few that stood out from my weekly beats year that I was like, hey, this is something I keep coming back to. When I listen to this, I really like it. So I'm going to probably revisit that for the album. In other cases, it's like the intent I had for a track just didn't sort of realize within that week. And in some cases, like the spooky season track we're going to listen to, it was like, this is a good palette on which to sort of like continue and revisit that sort of idea. And I can talk about that track particularly
Yeah,
when we listen
yeah.
to it. But it's sort of like the track is good enough that it's worth revisiting to sort of learn something. even then, I tend not to go back unless there's another reason for using it. And so in this case, that track's going to be on a compilation that Josh is doing, which again, I will talk about when we get
Sweet.
there. But yeah, or like, for instance, one of the songs that I picked, The Message, is like sort of the first kind of cornerstone of like a new album that I'm composing. And it also was a really good track, and I did a lot of new things there, and it's very complex, so I was definitely going to kind of revisit it, but I also knew that it was going to be like the touchstone for an entire album of tracks, which I'm hoping to get to this year. And so like, yeah, when I revisit something, it's usually got to have like a few intentions. It's got to have context around it. It's not just to sort of noodle with it, because yeah, that's a trap.
Yeah. And you just mentioned The Message, and that's kind of like a touch point to build an album. Is that like, hey, I want to make more songs like this that all kind of go together?
Yeah.
Is that the
And
intention?
so that song in particular has like a story that I wanted to explore more. It has particular sounds and like a riff that I think could play out as a motif in other songs, and it kind of encapsulates a whole bunch of ideas, both like musically and aesthetically, that I think could spread across like 7 to 9 tracks for a whole album.
Got it.
And it also like captures my interest enough. Like I keep coming
Mm-hmm.
back to it, and I'm like, yeah, I wanna live in that space a little longer.
Yeah, and
And
then the album that you just released, Pulsar Suite, uh, that feels to me like, hey, I had all of these songs from Weekly Beats that, I mean, they were all intentionally in, like, they were all named Pulsar Suite. They were all
yeah,
similarly themed, that then you repackaged into an album. So were you kind of thinking about that, the album, as the end goal when you were doing this?
I think partially, yeah. It's kind of funny. I had started writing up the idea for the Pulsar Suite in September last year, when we were just about to hit October, aka spooky season. And I was like, this is what I'm going to do for October. And it was going to be like this sort of like space ghost story. And then, like, I think it was the week before October, like something just clicked in my brain. And I was like, nope, can't do this. And I was like, all right, I'm doing like spooky
It's
mid
spooky
tempo for all of
season.
October. And that's what I did. So like that was my spooky season volume 1 tracks. But, over the course of October, the ideas for the Pulsar Suite kept kind of percolating in my brain. And then I hit November and I was like, all right, let's do this. And got started on that. And so there was 4 tracks that sort of encapsulated the suite itself. And then there was a 5th track that it was my last track of the year. We'll listen to that as well.
Yeah.
That I did with my brother. And then sort of in the middle of that, I collaborated with Joshua Wayne Hensley, JWH, to do sort of almost like a bonus track called Brother Can You Hear Me, which is absolutely beautiful and has its own
It is.
story behind it. And so he very generously said I could put that on the album with the rest of them, because both of us wanted that song to have a place somewhere, and we hadn't
Yeah.
really figured out where. And I think it does very well there. Of course, the sad story behind the Pulsar Suite is that while I was recording that, while Josh was helping out with that song, my dog Max was dying.
Yeah.
And we had a very long, arduous couple of months sort of helping him on his way, but it was so unpredictable. It was so up and down that I think a lot of that emotional energy channeled into what became the Pulsar Suite, which is in part why like it took me a couple months to sort of come back to it, because
Yeah.
everything was very fresh.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. I'm very proud of it. I think it's really kind of a beautiful bit of music, and forever grateful to Josh for contributing that
Yeah.
track, because what he made was like he took something that I made and then he added his own spirit to it, and it was
Yeah.
just completely magical. So it was really cool.
Yeah, it's a great tune, and I remember the song inspired by your dog coming up, and I had recently lost my dog like the summer before, so it's still very fresh for me.
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely.
And that's one of the wonderful things about Weekly Beats is like I think halfway through the year you started to see those kind of levels of personal interactions amongst the community, right? And like
Yeah.
you'd have friends and people and a lot of people unafraid to sort of talk about, hey, this is the shit going on in my life this week,
Yeah.
and people being able to relate to it. And I think that's kind of got its own magic. Like
Yeah. It's
it's
like
really,
halfway through the year, people are like, we've put out enough music that you can sort of like take off any sort of protective shell because you're like, I'm
yeah,
like,
we're all in this together, right?
yeah.
Yeah,
Nothing bad has happened in 26 weeks as far as like
yeah.
opening up to strangers, so we can go further.
Exactly. Yeah,
Yeah. So in it sounds like your music creation process is very story driven, or
yeah,
like you kind of have like some preconceived direction you want to go in.
yeah. So like at the end of Weekly Beats, I kind of reviewed the year and made notes and sort of just figured some things out. And for sure, like I was most effective or realized what was in my head most effectively when I had kind of a context around it, like a narrative context or something to sort of guide what I was doing.
Yeah.
Like I could make some good noodles, so to speak. But like when I had kind of like an idea that I was working from with some intention, I tended to produce a lot more efficiently, tended
Mhm.
to realize the idea in my head a lot better. And like stories, like my whole life has been storytelling. Like I spent, I don't know, the last 10 years or so writing fiction.
Okay.
I worked as a photographer for a number of years, and a lot of that was like narrative photography. So there's
Yeah.
kind of always like a story in my head. And music is a great way to take little pieces of that and just turn it into something someone can absorb in 5 minutes instead of having to read a 200-page novel.
Yeah. Do you feel like what's the mix of portraying that story between vocals and sort of like a cinematic feel that some of your songs have?
I usually go for the mood first. And so the vocals are meant to like punctuate, or like just kind of like bring a little bit of clarity to sort of the mood that I'm trying to create.
Mhm.
I do find that like it can get challenging or I can make mistakes if I try to work too intently or didactically and don't let the song be what it wants to be or the music just sort of be
Got
what it
it.
wants to be. And like in some cases that doesn't quite work out. Like in some cases, what I end up with still sounds great, but in terms of like what my initial intention was, it's a little bit off the mark.
Mhm.
But it's still the product still sounds good. The song still has its own life. That's sort of what I'm focused on. You have to be flexible, I think.
Yeah.
You have to sort of let things be what they want to be, but at the same time, like it's always good to sort of have restrictions, limitations, to just sort of like guide you within
Yeah.
reason, obviously. I mean, it's fun to just sort of do whatever you want to, but like if you're
Yeah.
working on a deadline of a week, you
Yeah.
need to have some plan.
Well, I feel like I have not gotten to the point yet where I can be like, I want to make this kind of song, or here's the feeling I'm going for. It very much is like I let the thing evolve as I'm making it, and just
Mm,
through experimentation, like, oh, this is the direction I want to go. So, uh, like I've always been curious how other people have gotten to that point where you can be like, this is kind of what I'm going for, and like kind of put pen to paper, and like you said, you don't always get there, but it's at least a starting point.
yeah, I have like a really literal answer to that. It's a learning experience, but it's also being taught. And so, like my musical career, oh God, like in a nutshell, like I picked up music when I was really young. I was bullied out of music by an asshole music teacher in high
Oh
school
man.
who like used threats of suicide to try to cajole us to play better, which apparently was just fine in the 90s, I guess.
Yeah, it's a different time.
Yeah. I did the high school band thing. I played piano for a number of years. I picked up guitar in 2018. But the best musical decision I ever made for my musical career is like the pandemic started and I started taking lessons with Red Means Recording,
Oh,
also known
awesome.
as Jeremy. And, this is me shilling for Jeremy for sure. Like, I recommend anybody, if you want to learn anything about music, he can absolutely help you out. And
Yeah.
he's one of the best teachers I've ever had throughout my entire academic career. But one of the things he taught me was how to take a song that starts as you just experimenting. You might have some intentions, you might not have any, and figuring out what it wants to be.
Mm,
Then sort of isolating those moments in the song that are saying, hey, this is what this song is, and then working them into the framework of the genre or the type of music that sounds like. And then drawing from that genre to get the tools to make your song sound even better, essentially. Like,
got it.
there are elements of techno which are kind of common to all techno tracks, and you can certainly sit down with a list of the rules of techno and make a techno track and have something that people can dance to, which is fine. But you can also develop a piece of electronic music that isn't necessarily at the outset going to be a techno track, but then recognize, hey, people could dance to this, and then
Mm,
refine the arrangement so that it has that quality, it has that movement of energy, it has sort of a buildup that is felt on like a physical body level, so
yeah.
that someone can experience it and have that kind of experience. Because I think like one of the things Jeremy taught me is that like as musicians, we have the ultimate privilege of being in someone's head for like a full flat 5 minutes,
Yeah.
and we are giving them an experience and they are letting us give them that experience. And like there's certainly genres of music where you are inflicting an experience on someone, but I don't think most people listen to music for that goal, to have something inflicted on them, to be
Yeah.
assaulted by sound. A lot of people are listening to music for a particular experience. And so like ultimately in terms of kind of like intent, like I will go into composing a piece of music and just sort of go where it leads me with, maybe some rules that I want to follow or some ideas that I definitely want to explore. But when I'm finishing the music, I'm thinking about the full experience of the song for someone else listening. That being said, the Pulsar Suite definitely inflicts some experiences on people. Like,
uh,
like at least one of the tracks is pretty loud and intense, and some of the best voice acting I've ever done. But it sounds panicked, and it's certainly not the most relaxing thing in the world all the time.
but I mean that kind of that's just a different style of
Yeah,
storytelling.
yeah,
It's
exactly.
one thing to be like, this is dance music and we're dancing, and it's another one to be like, here, share this experience with me. Like it's
Yeah,
not always great, but like this is where we're going.
I call it headphones in the dark music,
Yeah, yeah,
and that comes from a story from my mom. Before I was born, when she was in nursing school, she'd go home after classes to her apartment and turn off the lights, put on the headphones, and listen to Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon, which I think is such a cool thing to do as a nursing student. But like,
yeah.
and like that was sort of like how she relaxed. And Dark Side of the Moon is certainly a very storied narrative album.
Mm-hmm.
And so like a lot of this kind of work that I'm doing is kind of like, you don't have to like sit in the dark and listen to it on headphones, but if you do, I really want it to be a good experience for you.
Yeah, yeah. And to kind of go back to something you mentioned a little bit ago, like the intention behind the music. Maybe this has something to do with working with Jeremy, but looking at your catalog over the year, it seemed like there was a shift from techno acid music to more ambient kind of like
Yeah.
storytelling.
Yeah, and like that's just a weird thing with me and my brain. I can't get away from techno music. And in part that's because, like, you know, when I was in like my early teens and late teens, like techno was exploding everywhere and I
Yeah.
was just engulfed in. But as a musician, it's a very technical genre. It's a very physical genre. You do have to think about how someone's going to experience it physically on a dance floor. The the way that the energy is structured throughout a track is very, very precise. You can flub it so easily. And so there's like a part of my brain that is fascinated with this almost like a crossword puzzle.
Oh, got it.
Yeah, and like
It's like assembling all the pieces for the
yeah,
maximum
and
effect.
understanding how they work. And what's really interesting is like that particular idea with the energy and how someone's experiencing it can totally apply to like cinematic orchestral stuff
Oh,
as
yeah.
well, right?
Yeah.
Because it's you know accompanying a story on the screen, and so there's a lot of crossover. But like with techno, is very very precise. Sound design's a huge part of it, which I absolutely love. And yeah, I just also it's fun to like make a banger that you're working in Ableton and you can't stop bobbing your head to, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and so that shift happened because like I'd started the year thinking I was going to do constant techno on the M8 because it was like what I was doing at the time. And I actually didn't think I'd be able to complete something more cinematic or ambient inside of a week. But then I was kind of realizing, wait, no, I think I can pull this off. And yeah, and then of course it's a whole year, so your mood changes, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And so I think after, I don't know, 18 weeks or so, I was like, I need to chill out this week. And that's what I did.
Awesome. What other tools do you use to make music besides the M8? I see behind you some
Yeah,
modular.
that's my modular setup. And I've got the Lyra here, which is by Soma Labs, and a Pulsar 23. And over there is just a MIDI keyboard, and I have a Hapax sequencer, which is a very
Ooh,
big,
yeah.
complicated sequencer, but really handy. And right now, my Hydrasynth is sitting there because we're going to give the Hydrasynth another chance to charm me. I used to love it, and then I started not liking it for a long time. And I don't know. That's just my mood.
I've always been tempted, and I saw this morning that Jeremy posted a Hydrosynth patch video, so
Yeah, and his that patch set is really, really good. So I'm kind of excited to play with that as well.
yeah.
So yeah, this is like my live gear setup. So the Pulsar Suite started in here. It's Pulsar Suite is like live modular gear based performances, which I then like edit down and add to and add the vocals and whatnot.
Cool.
And like this is like noodling. This is like an improvisational space for me. It's also
Yeah.
like a space that after 11:30 at night, I finally have the dogs settled and I can still do music in here without disturbing them because they're
Mhm.
senior dogs and they like to like wander and walk into walls if I don't get them
Yeah.
settled.
Yeah.
So like a lot of my stuff will start in here and then sort of like in a corner of another room which has all kinds of other crap in it. I've got like my big music computer, another MIDI keyboard, and that's basically where like I do all my Ableton work.
Got it.
Although I've done mastering on this little MacBook lately because I can also do that in bed without disturbing the dogs.
Yes. Because I was gonna ask you about live performance stuff.
Mm.
Do you perform out anywhere, or is this just, like you said, a way of, like, improvising and making music?
I don't perform out anywhere yet. I would like to.
Yeah.
The live gear set is always like a constantly changing thing, and there's a huge difference between having a table full of gear that you make music on and something you can carry to a venue.
Yes.
And I have yet to like settle on a table full of gear to make music on that I think is 100% working for me. So
Mhm.
we're a long way from that, but I would like to do like videos eventually,
Yeah.
or you know, stream little live performances. But like the live aspect is sort of like like you listen to one of Josh's songs, right? The guitar, the vocals have that sort of immediate feel to it, and
Mm-hmm.
like I think that can be present in any kind of. And so actually one of the tracks that you chose that we're going to listen to, The Runner, I think,
Yeah.
was very much about bringing like a live performance feel to like an acid synth,
Yeah.
and playing around with that, and so I think it's kind of an important component of just about any kind of music I make, although on the M8 it's a little trickier, obviously.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure. And I've definitely been interested in doing more of that improv live kind of stuff. And that's why I
Yeah.
got a Digitone 2 to kind of play around
Yes.
with, because the M8 is great, but and I know a lot of people have different setups with external controllers and stuff
Yeah, the
for their
new
M8.
Launchpad Pro
Right.
abilities they put into the new M8 firmware are pretty incredible, actually. And I just need some physical space so I can put my M8 beside a Launchpad Pro.
Yeah.
That's my biggest restraints on making music are space and time.
Yeah, I think with everyone.
But
Uh, well, should we get into the music?
yeah.
Cool. All right, we're gonna start out with The Message, and the version you sent me. This is not the Weekly Beats version. This is a RMR master, which I'm
Yes.
thinking means Red Mean Recording.
Yeah,
Red
it's an
Means Recording.
amazing master that he did.
Yeah,
It's just
I'm.
astounding.
Yeah, I want to come back and talk about, like, because I was listening to the difference between the two of them. So
For
yeah.
sure.
All right, let's check it out.
Been a long time. You still out there, singing to the sky. I've been wandering here, looking for a sign, a twinkling from your star. Let's leave this lonely road. We've been gone so long. The sun is getting old, and I'm feeling like I'll never make it home. To hear your song again. Hello, cowboy. I'm still riding these starry trails. Hey there, cowboy. Hope you're doing well.
All right, that was The Message, a Red Means recording remaster. Tell me, one, how this made your top pick, and then I want to talk about the remaster.
It's just like a favorite song for me, but it was also like a song that did a lot of new things. But the story behind it is kind of hilarious. I was just shooting the shit with Joshua, Wayne Hensley, JWH, and we were talking about like, isolationist cabin in the woods fantasies, this idea of like just getting away from society and, living in the woods or whatever. And we were joking that we'd live in cabins across the lake from each other and send messages by playing guitar riffs across the water, right?
Amazing.
And so it was like, we just play like a little guitar riff and it's like, hey, brother, can I borrow some sugar or something like that? And like that week we were like, hey, how about we just exchange guitar riffs and see if it takes us somewhere? And so like he recorded a little bit of the guitar at the very beginning there. And so it's my riff talking to his riff, sort of in the introduction, and his riff comes in as well in other places. And that idea sort of ballooned into sort of the story behind it, which is kind of like, this lonely space traveler sending out a message into the dark to his friend, the Starry Night Cowboy, who he's lost track of, essentially. And so it's kind of like these two guitars playing to each other across the expanse of space, and this sort of like lonely message just being sent out into the. And it's a compelling story. It definitely is a story that's present on my Autumn and Ganymede album. It's also followed up in the Pulsar suite, and it became sort of this little touchstone for a whole bunch of ideas. It's also the third song I ever recorded vocals on.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, and I was pretty pleased with how that turned out. I'm getting better with vocals. I never sang vocals on anything prior to Weekly Beats, which seems to be a theme for a lot of people.
Yes. I was going to ask you, how long you've been doing vocals and what made you finally, you know, jump the hump to start doing vocals, because I'm also doing these shows and people are like, "Yeah, you should do vocals too."
Yeah. Well, I mean, like we all do vocals because, you sing in the car or in the shower, right? Most people do. For me, uh, somewhere like halfway through Weekly Beats, there's kind of a fuck it, I'll try this sort of attitude that you start to see with a lot of
Mhm.
people. Like, well, why the fuck not?
Yeah,
Pardon my language, but that's the feeling, right? You're like, I'm
that's
just gonna do it.
appropriate language.
And I certainly kind of had a moment with vocals on that on like an earlier track. I think it's called Keep On Running. And like that was like an idea that came to me. I was out in the backyard with the dogs with my cell phone, and all of a sudden this little vocal melody and lyrics popped into my head, and I just like recorded it into my cell phone. Then I wrote the lyrics and recorded it, and then like that was one of like my favorite songs I'd done. And there's one of the songs that Josh was like, I don't mean to be that guy, but I feel like you wrote this for me. And I was like, whoa,
Oh, man.
all right, that's a compliment.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, and so I sort of chasing after vocal ideas, and writing lyrics came pretty naturally, but I think that's mostly because I've been writing for years.
Right.
And the other side of the equation was like technical know-how. Like I learned enough to know how I could make the vocals sound like what I wanted them to. And certainly that's still a journey, like getting the vocals to sound better and better. But for this track, I knew I wanted it to sound like, a radio space transmission, right?
Mhm.
And I knew how to do that. And it ended up
And I was
working out
gonna
pretty
ask,
well.
what did you do to achieve that sound? Because I thought it was, like, a really cool, not quite like true gritty radio microphone, like
Yeah.
AM, but, like, still that vibe with, like, more sonic tonal characteristics.
On the message, it's very complex. It's a vocal chain of like the same vocal track essentially repeated 3 times and processed 3 different ways. And so the top layer is a filtered layer that sounds sort of like the edge of the radio. And then there's kind of
Mhm.
a dry level so that you still get the actual sung vocal with some of the midtones and the bass, just to kind of fill out what the radio level is
Yeah.
cutting out. And then there's like at least 2 different levels of reverb.
Nice.
And this was a project that I worked on with Jeremy a lot, and he's taught me some amazing reverb tricks. Like
Sweet.
one of them is a reverb that essentially takes the higher frequencies from the vocal and just like makes them kind of soar a little bit, and it
Oh,
creates this like very intimate space. And so on one level, you can sort of hear the singer like in the distance, but on the other level, it's almost like you're just sitting at the front of the stage.
wow.
So there's a lot
That's
going
really
on in
cool.
there. But the radio voice thing is really just filtering. In later tracks, I used a tool called Speakers by, I think, Sound Toys, which is a combination of filtering and convolution measurements to mimic a bunch of actual devices, different speakers and microphones. And I use that a lot on the Pulsar Suite. So that's a very good tool. But for like a sung thing, you need a little bit more control. And so that's where I arrived here. I also find it easier to work with my own voice if I am doing a lot with it, because
Yeah.
the raw vocal is rough, man. Like,
Yeah, and I think that's what I've struggled with in the past, just dabbling in vocals. It was like, yeah, I don't like this.
yeah, it's tough.
Like, let me hide a little bit here.
Yeah, one of the things that I did like with Keep On Running, which is sort of like the first vocal track I did for Weekly Beats, was like as soon as I had recorded the vocal, I like processed the hell out of it. Like I made it sound like
Yeah.
something completely different, to the point where I couldn't recognize myself. And
Yeah.
then I could work with it to sort of like edit it down, to like correct it and whatnot. And then I pulled it back. And as I pulled it back, it came away from completely unrecognizable to this sounds really good.
Yeah.
But like the hardest part of recording vocals is when all you have is like that raw track and you're just listening to it and you're like, no.
Yeah. Like editing this podcast.
Yes. So you're getting trial by fire in this experience for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. That's why if there's any mistakes, I don't listen to the whole thing.
Yeah,
so.
But I will reiterate what Replicator said. You have a great deep voice. That, like,
thank you.
I mean, mine's pretty deep, but yours is way deeper, and you should absolutely give that a shot.
All right, I promise I will do some vocal. I'm even afraid saying that, but I will do it. I'm committing.
Yeah.
All right, so let's talk about more of the like remaster elements of this.
Yeah, so like I knew after posting this song that I'd want to return to it, and in particular, I knew that it would be the touchstone for the whole album, which I'm still working on, called Starry Night Cowboy, and it's going to be like a combination of like vocal and sort of post-rock country industrial edge tracks, which sounds like nonsense when I say it, but like I actually think the message encapsulates all those elements. So
that sounds like an AI generated
doesn't it though?
Spotify genre.
Yeah, I know. But it's like the country twang, the post-rock sort of guitar and like the bowed guitar idea, and then like the drums are somewhere between big drums in a barn somewhere and like industrial warehouse stuff. And it's like those three elements along with the kind of the space story. So yeah, I knew that I wanted to work with it. I knew that it was a good composition at the time, and so I brought that to Jeremy to work on it for a lesson, and we sort of like we actually did 2 sessions on it, once during Weekly Beats and then another one when I had sort of developed it from that point, just to refine it even further. And so working with him, like one of his phenomenal skills as a teacher is being able to like pick parts of a song that are doing something, that might be genre specific, or they're doing something with the energy and like really enhancing that effect and like being able to like really draw that out. And so there's moments in the message that we really like pulled out that way. There's moments where like the song could have become overwhelming, and then we sort of like cut that so that it became like a different feel. And then he really helped me develop the vocals. I went back into it, changed the arrangement a bit. So like this new version has like a break between the verses, which I think needed to be there. But in the original Weekly Beats one, I just didn't have time at all. And so that's there now. There's some new sort of like effects. The drums have been slightly enhanced. Everything has been cleaned up a little bit. Also at the time, I didn't know that you could quantize, like guitar recordings. And like the rhythm was not bad, but now the rhythm is like dead on. So,
all right.
Which I don't mind doing at all. Like I am not a bad guitar player, but I am not a great guitar player. So my brother is much better guitar player. Yeah. And so then I sort of took that back. I refined it to where I thought it was done. And when you work with Jeremy on lessons, he'll like master a track for you every month. And knowing that I wanted this to be the touchstone for an album, I wanted him to master it, because then I'd use that as sort of a reference for the mastering on the album as well when it was all done.
Nice.
And he did an incredible job. Like he is absolutely brilliant audio engineer, even though he would never claim to be an audio engineer.
I mean, I was listening to the 2 different versions, and what really stuck out to me is there's a section of the song that it like really starts to build, and there's toms and drums that in the remaster feel like they have like their own space.
Yeah.
And they're just so much more defined, but like sit in the mix perfectly.
Yeah. And like part of that is the work we did on the mix, and, just sort of making sure that the drums had the space that they needed. And then the other part is like Jeremy's mastering.
Yeah.
And being able to like perfectly pull that out. And like that's why I mastered 200 tracks last year. Like that's what I want to learn to do, right?
Yeah.
And I'm getting better, but not as good as him.
No, it sounds great, and it's really cool to listen to the different versions and see how you've improved it. And we'll listen to another one as well that I think you maybe changed more of the arrangement, but we'll talk about that later.
Yeah.
So yeah, but I mean, this is just a badass song.
Yeah.
It kind of grabs you from the very beginning with that tremolo, reverb, guitar. Like,
it's all about the mood, and like,
oh man,
there's nothing wrong with going into a song saying, I want to make a badass song. And I knew that's what I wanted to do here.
Yeah.
And like and I think it's fun. Like, Paisley Frog, right, is like the genre chameleon.
Oh my God.
And
I was
like,
I was
he totally
thinking about
understands this idea. Yeah.
When you were like, oh, I can like set intentions and make a song, I immediately thought of Paisley Frog and like, I'm going to make a B-52 song.
Yeah. And it's like the same principle. It's understanding the way the tools of the genre work and applying it to what you're working on. And like, this song was like, there were specific things I knew I wanted to exploit, most notably that twangy guitar. Like,
yeah.
But then also the like the big drums.
Yeah.
Actually, my sort of musical reference for this was "Dead of Night" by Orville Peck.
Oh, okay.
Which is this very simple guitar and big drum song, and a crooning cowboy in a mask. So it was an appropriate sort of source of inspiration, I think.
Yeah, and the story is really cool. Sending messages across the lake.
Yeah, it was great. Yeah, Josh is an inspiration.
Oh yeah,
magical man.
He's great. Episode 1.
Exactly.
All right, we're gonna move on to Zero Star.
Cool.
Here we go. All right, that was Zero Star. That goes hard from the beginning.
Yeah. Yeah. So I had to pick an M8 track for one of my faves. And this was, I think, the last M8 track I did for Weekly Beats. You know, like I did techno for the first 18 weeks. And then we did spooky season in October, where I started diving into like mid-tempo techno and industrial, which was super fun. But there's sort of like aspects of both genres that I never quite kind of like perfected, and like mid-tempo is extremely complex, and I'm still getting there. And we're going to listen to another song that I think is getting even further into mid-tempo later. But like this one, I just really enjoyed my execution on it. It was really fun. It came easily. It also like featured, I think, my first M8 track that I sampled the Pulsar 23 to do the drums. And like the Pulsar 23 by Soma is absolutely my favorite drum machine that I like. It was like made for me, honestly. And I'd wanted one for years, and I was finally able to like afford one last fall. And it's fantastic. It's used in the Pulsar suite as well. But I sampled right into the M8. Like I just started
Awesome.
like just hooked it right up into the M8, grabbed those drums, sliced them up, and then like made this. I also had the entirety of the year's worth of sound design on the M8 at my disposal, and that's why this one is completely filthy and noisy and screeching, and it's just super, super fun.
What's your go-to instrument to sound design?
Mostly the macro synth.
Yeah.
I've been doing a lot of stuff on the FM synth lately, but the macro synth has like just some really excellent little synthesizers with like things you can modulate in completely crazy ways. Like I think the screeching leads in this track in particular are like the saw comb, and it's just like adjusting the position of the comb filter in weird, and I just love the sound. It's noisy and disgusting, and
yeah,
it works really well.
Well, I'm waiting on a Neon Liminal sound pack for the M8. So
I know. It'll happen. It'll happen. I have folders and folders of instruments.
I'm sure.
Yeah, no, I actually do want to make like a sound pack for the M8 and accompany it with like a Pulsar sample set.
Yeah.
For drums. So, but that's like a whole other endeavor.
Like the snare on the drums, where it's like a quick release and then like a slow release snare to like set them apart. I was like, ooh, that's really cool.
Yeah, I spent last fall. Well, I've been doing this ever since. I've been listening to a lot of mid tempo, particularly like Rez, who is delightful and campy and weird. There's if you want to listen to more spooky mid tempo, she has Nightmare on Rez Street volumes 1 and 2.
Nice.
Which are just fantastic. But as I was listening to a lot of it, I was hearing a lot of Nine Inch Nails from like the late 90s and early 2000s. And there's definitely a connection between like current mid-tempo and sort of like that era of industrial.
Yeah.
And those snares that you're pointing out in particular are very Nine Inch Nails snares, like a particular way of crafting. And again, like when we were talking about borrowing things from genres, like this track in particular, I had learned enough about mid-tempo and I knew enough about industrial to sort of like grab those little elements to just kind of bring into the track and make it pump.
Yeah. I also love around 2 minutes, it kind of goes into this chord progression. And it's so good, like the harmonies, and I think that's just what like set this one off for me. Yeah,
like the hypersynth instrument. I think I actually have to credit you for some of the hypersynth, because I think on one of your tracks, I remember listening and I was like, I need to play with that more, because I do like the hypersynth, but I hadn't quite used it as extensively as other things. But in my in the idea that a week isn't quite enough time to like finish a track on the M8 for me, like There's a lot of my techno mid-tempo songs from Spooky Season that about the 2-minute mark descend to synthwave, saving the day.
Yeah.
And that's fine. It works great on this track. But it was kind of like, all right, I really need a moment here, and the hypersynth and these kind of big synthwave chords are really going to do it. And there's like, what do you call it? There's precedence for that in mid-tempo for sure. And Rez in particular sort of descends into synthwave every now and then. So it's a fun little mix-up. I think one of the characteristics of mid-tempo techno is the idea of interruption, the idea of glitch, and the idea of like surprise.
Yeah.
And so those sort of dropouts can be like one of the surprises, but then another element is like when you get this complete shift in the mood. And I knew I wanted to elevate the song at that point, and I thought, like, let's just do big chords.
Yeah.
And it came in well, yeah.
I'm all about that hypersynth.
Yep.
All right, we're going to move on now to The Dark We Left Behind.
Goodbye, Starry Night Cowboy. I'll miss you when I'm gone. We danced our way to the edge of twilight. But now I'm rambling home. can still hear me. I know we've gone our separate ways, but take care of yourself out there. Remember, there's always someone out there waiting to be found, or hoping to find you. You can always find me in the dark between the stars. I'll be glowing like neon too. Goodbye, my friend. Stay safe.
That was The Dark We Left Behind. Very haunting beginning and another great building song.
Yeah, so that was my last track of the year. It was the week of Christmas, I think. Did we finish like before Christmas, or was it? Yeah, it was the 29th, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was like the week of Christmas. My brother and his wife were down visiting, and he was not really hot on trying to like do a track on his own, and it was a rare time for us to actually be in the same house for an extended period. So we decided to collaborate. So he contributed a lot of the guitars there. It was written as like a coda to the Pulsar suite. It's sort of like almost like an end credit song, I guess.
Yeah.
And it has like that little bit of vocal, and then the sort of the dialogue at the end was kind of like goodbye to the story, and also like goodbye to everybody on Weekly Beats, because like there was something kind of magical there.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it was really, really fun. This is another one that I actually had a chance to work on with Jeremy before we posted, because it was just like the timing of when I was going to work with him was kind of ideal. And so like he helped add a few little ideas in there to kind of like get it finished. And we posted what we did, and it was really, really good. But then when I came back to it for the album, I knew there was some things I wanted to change, most notably me trying to sing. So like I think that the album version's got a much better vocal. It's in tune. Whereas my original, I didn't even bother to like try to tune it, and it definitely did not sound fantastic there. But yeah, every time I listen to it, I get goosebumps. So I think it's a good song that way. It has that, it has the mood that I wanted.
And sort of like a point in time element. Like, I feel like there's just something special about the last song of the Weekly Beats year, where it's like closing out accomplishments, closing out the year. Because like when I go back and listen to my last song of the year, I kind of get like all the same feels of like
all the feels. Yeah.
As I've talked about before, like these journal points throughout the year. Like the last song is just kind of like a real special one.
Yeah, and like the dialogue at the end there was definitely feeding off the kind of emotional state of sort of ending off the year right there. Travelers going on their way, right? You know, telling everybody to stay safe. And of course, you know, the end of 2024 was pretty tumultuous for just about everybody. So it felt like it was important to kind of recognize that, I guess, too. But it was also like just while the other 4 tracks in the Pulsar suite sort of tell the story, this one really, I think, played the mood for me. Like it really sort of brought it to an end. And it's also like I was really pleased with the way it turned out. All the sort of effects at the end there, like the kind of like burning of the engine and the sound of the waves and everything actually came from the Pulsar 23.
Oh,
me
wow.
Doing like weird things with it. So like on a technical level, that was like really, really fantastic. I was very pleased with how that worked.
Dang. Do I need a Pulsar 23 now?
Yeah. There's 2 versions.
I just looked
One's
up prices.
cheaper,
Maybe not.
Yeah. Yeah, no, they did bring a less expensive version that uses stainless steel screws for the connections instead of these like hand machined like turrets, and it apparently cut $800 off the price. So
okay, cool.
Yeah, there's options. Yeah, it's an amazing, and it contributed so much to sort of like the mood of that track because there's just a lot going on there, and it was running through my modular, which creates a lot of the kind of heavier moments in the drums in that, as well as some of like the drop moments where there's sort of like these reverse sounds, and that was all just the modular. This was another track where the original modular sort of recording was like 12 or 13 minutes long. And then I brought that into Ableton and I cut and arranged it down to like, I think it's about 7 minutes or so now. And then like the drums in particular, because of course everything's on the beat, I can then cut and slice to arrange the drums to create the energy that I want, which is challenging, but it's a great method. For the whole Pulsar suite was done that way. A number of tracks I recorded this year were done that way as well.
Wow. So you just sort of, are you kind of improvising and then just recording a ton of stuff and then coming back and being like, okay, these go well together?
Yeah, I'll usually try to do 2 or 3 takes, but like almost inevitably it's the last take that I go with, and sort of like the initial couple takes are sort of like practicing, sort of understanding the energy of where the track's going to be and sort of some of the very specific effects that I want to do. And that adds that like that live element to something that's otherwise, entirely electronic, right? It brings a sort of like performative accents into the music that kind of then contribute to the feel. And it's also just good practice for, learning to perform in case I ever actually stream something, but that would require having time to stream something.
Yes, that is another form of musical commitment.
Yep, it sure is. But yeah, no, it was, I could not be happier with a final track to the year. And I think it worked really well as sort of the last track before the last track on the album, which...
And like you said, kind of like the credit reel for the Pulsar series, but also for just the entire year. Absolutely.
And like when I was recording it and arranging it, I literally had like end credits music in my head to like some kind of big space movie. It was totally, And I think that it came out that way, which is, makes me very happy. So
I just love how you like always have this like story in mind when you're creating.
It's, and like the dialogue is, like it's dialogue that I had, written parts of, but it's sort of like things I had going through my head over the months, right? Like I knew that there was like particular sets of words that would be important, like, hey, can you hear me? And I've got you. And that story kind of like guides the way that the music's going to go, but then we bring the dialogue in at the end to kind of just give it clarity. And
so
some
cool.
clarity. I know that it is a pretty mysterious story, but I think it works pretty well.
I mean, I think if it's too direct, there's not as much room for interpretation.
You want to always leave room for imagination. Like that's the big thing, is like when I talk about headphones in the dark music and this story of my mom coming home from nursing school, going back to her apartment, turning off the lights and listening to Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon, right? A big part of that is imagination and how that plays into the experience of listening to the music and sort of just like relaxing and let like something just sort of take off in your head. And so, both the albums I've released are very much aimed at either, headphones in the dark or like, dissociated commute home on a subway in New York. That would be fine too. That would work just well. Just as long as you're not driving.
No. It's not driving music.
No. Well, maybe, I don't
know. Well, we're going to get into some more spooky music with one of my picks. Cool. This is We Know Where You Go When You Die.
Yeah.
Mirror, mirror, quake and shiver, blood-dim glass and frenzied fever. What there lurks beneath
That was one of my top picks. I loved all of the spooky season. Like, I feel like that's when I really took off listening to your stuff. As like the spooky season. I was like, oh shit, like this is awesome. And your friend Diana is doing vocals and they are creepy as hell. And we were talking about like characteristics of mid-tempo and those like dropouts with just the drums, and then another great switch to synthwave chords. Like it's got it all.
Yeah, like the mid-tempo thing was weird because like I'd planned to do essentially what is the Pulsar Suite in October, and then I hit like October 1st, and I was like, nope, can't do it. And suddenly I was doing like mid-tempo on the M8, and we decided to do Spooky Season, which people really responded well to. And I just had a whole ton of fun because it's like, it's working on a complex form of techno, but it's also like campy and spooky and weird. I got friends involved, and so like Josh did one track and Diana did a track and my friend Alan did a track and I did the vocals on a couple, and it was a fun thing for me to do vocals because I got to like just pretend to be like this Vincent Price riffraff from Rocky Horror Picture Show. Weird. I gotta say, like on the one track, the little short stanza I wrote, which is like, it came in the night like a scent on the wind, ashes and lavender and the scent of your skin. And just as it passed, I felt my hair singe, for the sky was ablaze with our sins. Like, I fucking love that. I'm sorry. It's me.
That's great.
But I absolutely love it. And so, that was like start of it. And then like wanted to do this sort of like mirror style thing, and my friend Diana is a voice actor and they are incredibly talented, so I got them to record a bunch of this for me, and they went all out. They got like their little H6 and recorded like the screaming from different distances in like a warehouse and all kinds of stuff, and the track just took off and it was really great. And Diana sounds absolutely terrifying.
Agreed.
So this is another track that also like really evolved from the original. So earlier this year, Josh contacted me and he wanted to put this track on a compilation, which he's putting together. And so it is called Misc Tape Volume 2 Unsilenced. And he's putting it out on his label Patsy Presents.
Sweet.
And it's going to be like a charity compilation with all proceeds going to St. Margaret's House, which is a sanctuary for women in South Bend, Indiana, probably out this summer. And it's got to be a pretty cool women's sanctuary if, you know, the compilation can have a track as scary and terrifying like this.
Yeah.
So, and so like I started refining it. And so the original was very good, but it really didn't capture a lot of the essence of mid-tempo, which is this sort of element of interruption, this element of glitch, this element of surprise that sort of makes the music like progress along, and sort of it kind of plays with the beat back and forth. And so the way this evolved from the original M8 version is sort of really pushing it into mid-tempo territory, and you hear a lot of that in the first section with those sort of dropouts and whatnot, and then into like this big crescendo moment, which I think was really important for the song. Like, it's kind of like a haunted house roller coaster, and like everything is sort of like spooky and terrifying and jump scare for a while, and then like you kind of climbed up the hill, and like the last part of the song is like rushing down and like everything going past you fast. And so really fun. I really like this one.
Listening to the Weekly Beats version and this sort of like rearrangement, I know like it seems like you rearranged more than some of the other remixes.
I also really cut it down.
It's like a minute shorter.
And like that's actually still technically too long. If you listen to a lot of mid-tempo, most of it's under 3 minutes, and a lot of it clocks in at 2.5 minutes, which I think is insane. That is too short.
We have short attention spans now, man.
Well, it's. I have two funny stories about this. The first one is when Lady Gaga put out her new track "Disease" for her new album earlier this year. The BBC reviewed the track, which I think is the weirdest thing. The BBC on the front page had a review of a Lady Gaga song. And the writer said that it clocks in at an unfashionably long 4 minutes. It's just like, what's going on?
Man.
But Disease is like, it borrows from mid-tempo quite a bit, which was kind of funny. But then the other funny story about this is back in September, I spent like a few days in Toronto in the gay village, and we were at like a drag bar, and I have a drag queen friend there, and her name is Deirdre Bidness, and she was performing with another drag queen who did a Rez song, which sounded fantastic. But I was talking with Deirdre, aka Zach, afterwards, and he was saying like the songs are getting too damn short. Like if it's 2.5 minutes as like a performance for a drag queen, there's just no room to have any kind of dynamics in the performance, because it's like over before you've even like gotten the energy up there.
Yeah.
And like, yeah, short attention span might be part of it. I also think like in a arena environment, when listening to this kind of music that has so much interruption and surprise, like you do need to sort of like shift the mood a little more frequently. So that could be part of what's going on. But yeah, so I did cut it down by like a full minute. But I don't think I could go shorter.
Yeah, we're not all at the bus stop on our tape players with no interruptions, you know.
Yeah, exactly. But it was really fun. So it was a good one.
It's a great one. I love it.
And there will be a Spooky Season Volume 2. I have started work on it. So
heck yeah. Yeah, you mentioned that like because mid-tempo is very technical and nuanced, that like you spent a significant time on this one.
Yeah, it was a couple months. I mean, like when I say a couple months, it means like I might get like an hour a day to work on it because of the rest of my schedule. But yeah, I worked on this after the fact with Jeremy a bit, and we sort of explored some sections where like the mid-tempo glitches needed to sort of enter to really carry the track into that kind of realm. And then it was a matter of essentially understanding how that element of interruption, glitch, and surprise would work in this track specifically, and then getting the sounds right to sort of match the mood, and then getting the drums right to make sure the beat carries, and then getting everything else right. And it was a chore for sure.
So that brings up an interesting question of how many songs are kind of like in the works on any given week during Weekly Beats?
Physical song in the works being arranged, it's usually only one. But one of my strategies for Weekly Beats was to always have ideas going.
Okay.
So if I'm working on a song on the M8, I'm probably patching something on the modular to do some sound design.
Okay.
And then there's usually something on my PC that I'm working on in the other sort of little studio over there. But that was often like larger projects like album projects and whatnot. But like in terms of like composing a song, arranging a song, I'm usually only doing one at a time.
Yeah, I have a strict one song at a time rule, because otherwise I'll start like, I'll be like, no, this isn't going anywhere, start another one. Oh, and then go back to the first one and like never finish anything.
I heard people talk about how like they have difficulty finishing songs, and I totally understand that problem. But like for me, I just start a song and I finish it. Like
wasn't that nice?
Yeah. Like I might, and by finish it, I mean like I will at least get it to the point where the arrangement is finished, the whole song is structured, and then like if I have to shelve it for a while and then come back to it, at least I know that there isn't anything hanging that I have to like do that's like completely crucial. But yeah, in terms of like, sort of like how many things are on the go, I always want at least a couple ideas working so that I can kind of make progress somewhere. Because I think my biggest fear during Weekly was like starting the week out and having absolutely no idea what I'm going to do.
That is a scary time.
Yeah. So this way I didn't face that. And then the modular for sure was like a big help there because
Big
I can just
idea
have it like
machine.
patched up. I can mess around with it at random
Yeah.
moments. And then like if a week comes where it's like, okay, I need a song, and I might have like a sound on there that I can then just develop something from. So
yeah, I think for me it's like just giving an idea enough time to have it go somewhere versus
yeah.
like giving up on it too soon to start something else that has even less progress going for it.
Yeah. I think another skill that's important is to like recognize early when something is just not going to work.
Yeah.
And that's hard.
That is hard. That is hard. And then sometimes those ones that don't work, you revisit them and you're like, oh, I know how to make this work now.
Exactly.
So,
yeah. No time is wasted.
The boneyard. Always look in the boneyard.
Absolutely. Yeah.
All right. We're going to move on to song number 30, which we would also call Giant Droning Wall of Sound.
Yes.
Here we go. I felt like I needed to include a diverse selection of your Weekly Beats catalog.
Yeah.
And this was one of those where it's like this just like long evolving ambient work, like you just said, headphones in the dark music. But I just love uh how it swells and changes, and like just how the mood evolves, that I was like, I gotta put this in.
Yeah. This was one of the rare tracks that I did entirely like on Ableton. And so I was experimenting with developing that kind of like ambient wall of sound in the background to play guitar over, essentially. I think the Soma Lyra 8 is featured there as well. There's some of the drone from that. And then it was kind of like, it was around this time I was just experimenting with getting back to like playing on the guitar and actually recording it, which one of the things, like when I have adult friends trying to learn instruments, right? Adults learn differently from children, right? And like if I were to take guitar lessons from, pardon me, some 20-something musical undergrad who's used to teaching like 13-year-olds, right?
Yeah.
Like I'm not playing fucking Mary Had a Little Lamb on guitar.
Yeah.
I have zero interest in that. And so like as a musician, as a composer, I want to be able to like apply guitar and I want to be able to record it. And even though my skill isn't like super high, I can still play pretty well.
Yeah.
And so like around this time, I was kind of getting back into just sort of like improvising melodies on guitar, especially over top of this big droning wall of sound, which for me is very relaxing. And there's kind of like a sense of drama there as well, because it builds. And that's where that came from. And I thought the guitar was just kind of fun. This was the period during which I was not giving things titles because it was stressful time and my brain just wasn't working in those terms. And so a lot of this music was just kind of like, get it done. And it turned out pretty well. And a few of the tracks from that time ended up on Autumn on Ganymede. This one did not, but it's still one of my favorites because it sounds very, very big.
Yeah, and a great album, by the way, that people should check out.
Yes.
I listened to it when it came out, and I'm always in awe of people that can create more ambient style music, because that's one that I don't always have the patience to make. Like and I've talked about this before, like I maybe think that other people don't have the patience to listen to it. Like I want it to get somewhere faster.
I think that's true.
But I can listen to other people's ambient music and enjoy it. So
yeah, it's, like for me, it's two completely different states of mind between making something like mid-tempo or techno and making something ambient. And it's like two parts of my brain that need different things. And I have to sort of like allow them both to have some time making music. But yeah, I think the state of mind listening to something like this or listening to ambient and like the kind of mode that your brain is in is very different from something mid-tempo or techno-ish. Techno is about dancing. Techno is about experiencing the music on a very physical level. Whereas I think ambient is about, Jeremy refers to it as sonic wallpaper, which I think is kind of true. Yeah. But like a lot of the ambient I make also has that cinematic aspect. And so it tries to create like a tension and a mood. And like one of my goals with a lot of art stuff, because I've also done photography and writing, is to create things that haunt you after the fact, that you might remember like just one element of, and it kind of suddenly pushes you somewhere else and it elicits a memory, or maybe while you're listening to it, it suddenly brings up a memory you didn't expect. And I don't think you can do that in a short period of time. I think you have to kind of move your listener's brain into like a different space where like the imagination is activated, where they're sort of relaxing, where they're sort of becoming absorbed by what they're listening to, and then have that sort of experience transform, and you just tweak the mood just a little bit with the tension and the energy to kind of like help someone have a little escape, I guess.
Yeah, and it takes time to leave the current world and get to that place where you can have those sonic experiences.
Yeah, it's very rare that you have a piece of music that can instantly transport someone.
Yeah, it's
I think they
you gotta have the
exist.
setup.
Yeah, you got to sort of like, and it's also, you know, it can be very startling to instantly transport someone, whereas this is kind of like letting them in, letting them take their
Yeah.
time, which I think is important. And I like that kind of mood. I mean, I listen to a lot of music like this all the time, especially like driving back and forth to the Animal Cancer Center in Guelph is like a 45-minute drive. I've got a dog in the back of the car that doesn't necessarily want to be listening to techno. So
True.
something like this kind of relaxes them.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's those sort of in between moments, which of course is where, you know, my band name comes from. Neon Liminal is about
Yeah.
the spaces in between things. So,
Love the liminal space subreddit.
Yes. That certainly did take off during the pandemic, man. Liminal photography, liminal spaces. Yeah, it's very interesting. Yeah. Coming from an academic photography sort of perspective, I had to write, you know, master's essays and critical shit like that. And liminal photography was huge and still is. It's very interesting where it goes. But I think what's interesting is like what it says about our brains in the current world, you know, like, and how we kind of need those moments in between. So
we need to have some empty space every now and then.
Exactly.
Not filled
and
with techno.
That's another like lesson in music that I learned, especially from Jeremy, is like you need to think about the space in between the notes and the sound as well.
Even though it's kind of as you mentioned, a hallmark of mid-tempo, but the space where you drop out and it's just the drums, like that just adds so much to the feeling of the song.
For sure. And like I think in mid-tempo, those spaces are exploiting or taking advantage of our tendency to anticipate.
Yeah.
And so you're anticipating a beat there and suddenly the beat's gone. And you get this moment that's like, oh, wow, right?
Yeah.
Whereas in ambient, like when I will carve out space in a track, it's usually at a moment where the tension or the energy has built. And I just want to let you like suddenly float above everything.
Yeah.
And sometimes I achieve that.
I mean, we're all trying to achieve the things that are in our heads. So and we're not always successful. So.
No, but that's the journey, right?
Yeah.
Like, that's the learning. So.
Well, cool. We are down to the last song.
Cool.
The final song we're going to play out is The Runner, Acid Daddy Live.
Yeah.
So I chose this one because so much of your catalog is techno music. And I was like, I gotta include a techno piece. And I also thought that it was cool that this was a live performance take. So I wanted to talk with you about it.
Yeah. Yeah. So like I started out Weekly Beats as a study in techno on the M8 for sure, because techno was like a genre I wanted to really understand. It's a very technical genre. It's a very physical genre. It's about people on a dance floor experiencing the music with their body, not just their ears. There's a lot of requirements in terms of like structuring the energy so that you don't do anything that surprises people in a way that makes them kind of like drop out of that experience. There's a lot of historical elements to techno, like particular drums, particular hi-hats, particular snares that aren't so much like a rule of techno, but it's like when you hear that done perfectly, you're like, yes, I understand this, right? Like, yes, I want to dance, right? And so learning about techno was about learning about that. And somewhere in those first 14 weeks, I was like, oh, I fucking love acid techno, right? And so I was playing around with like a lot of, 303 sounds on the M8. Like I was either using like the built-in engines to make like a 303 style acid bass line. And then like I got Mikey 303's pack that he used that he sampled from, like an original TB 303, which sounded really great. But like then I was also looking at how do I make acid sounds with the gear I already have, as well as wanting to do like a live performance, because one of the hallmarks of acid in particular is that the original TB303, you could sequence it, but all of the adjustments to like the modulation, to the filter, everything had to be done by hand on the dials. And so if it was either a recording you heard where someone was performing and adjusting those dials as they recorded it, or if it was actually, a techno producer performing at a club, they had a 303 there and they were adjusting those dials and they were performing on the dials. They were like playing the instrument. And on the M8, that's harder to do because the M8's a tracker. It's very didactic in the way that modulation is applied. You can certainly like record modulation if you have like a MIDI setup, which I will admit I have not successfully done yet.
Yeah.
But, like to get that like sort of real acid feel, there's like a performance element that needs to come into it. And I was like, okay, I need to sort of like try to do this live. So this track is the Digitact doing the drums, which I think worked really well. It's using a bunch of 909 samples, so it's eliciting that like 90s techno feel, like right from like the kick and the snare. I have a Novation Bass Station 2 doing like the bass line, which is a great synth for any kind of bass line, and it's got a really nice resonance on the filter, so it gets sort of an acid feel. And then the lead was a Norand mono, which is a little mono synth made by like one guy in France. Like I had to order it from him. And it's a very deep synth. It's got like a really good resonant filter. It confuses the hell out of the hologram microcosm, which is kind of funny. I don't know if you're familiar with the microcosm, but it's like a guitar pedal that's used in all kinds of synths. It's like instant ambient. It's really, really good. But because when it goes resonant, it goes real loud, and the microcosm likes to sort of track the loudness of things. And so, that was kind of like a sticky problem, but we
Interesting.
got yeah.
So it tries to like limit the loudness and then like
it
kind of
has
screws up
envelope followers. And so an envelope follower basically tries to detect the loudness and the transient of the sound that is coming in. And so it's really designed for like guitar notes. But a guitar tends to have fairly consistent volume, whereas a resonant synth can get super loud in some of the higher frequencies. And so sometimes it would make the microcosm do weird things. So that was the first challenge, because I had wanted to use the microcosm, and I think I ended up swapping it with the Zoya or something like that. But yeah, it was just, after that, it was programming the drums. It was deciding on like a melody for the lead and getting like that really chugging bass on the bass station. And I think it worked out pretty good. I liked that setup, but it's a lot of buttons to be performing on.
Yeah.
And so the Digitact was programmed and sequenced, and I did like some small adjustments, but mostly I wasn't sort of touching that, and mostly focusing on the Bass Station 2 and the Norand mono. And it sounds pretty good.
You talked about using song mode, which is something that I haven't used on my Digitone yet.
It's an interesting implementation. I got
to put it.
very, very frustrated with the ambiguous state of whether you have had your progress saved or not, and where it saves it, because it apparently doesn't save it with the project or something. I still don't honestly understand it, and I did lose an entire week's worth of work once because of that.
Oh.
So if you are going to use it live, or if you're focusing on relying on song mode on your Digitone, make sure you understand how it saves.
Got it. I will look out for that. I've been less concerned about doing song mode on it because I want it to be a little bit more of a performance-based thing. I'm like, the M8 is my song mode.
Yeah, exactly. For this track, I knew that I wasn't going to be... I wanted the performance elements to come into the two synths.
Yeah.
I didn't want to be constantly muting tracks and hitting like the fill buttons on the Digitac to sort of like perform the drums. And so like I let the song mode do that. And it does a really good job. And like that drum structure is so important to techno. Those builds and those crashes are so important to techno. So it was like, don't leave that to trance or to chance. Sorry.
Ooh, nice.
Yeah. Trance is good music too. But anyway. But yeah, I think it worked. Was it fun? It was pretty fun. Would I do a live set that way? Absolutely not.
Right. Yeah.
It was a good experiment. Like the live sets are going to be something different when we get there. But
you learned a lot about techno.
Yes, I did. Yeah. And I feel like halfway through the year, I learned enough about techno and we started doing other things.
Yeah.
I'll still return to techno, but yeah.
I mean, listening to your techno, I would have thought that you I thought that I was going to look at your weekly beats and you had like 4 years of techno tracks.
I've got, well, I have 30 years of listening to techno. So.
Got it. All right. You got experience in other ways.
It occupies a major part of my brain. So, yeah.
Well, we will close out the episode and let people hear it.
Cool.
Thanks again for being on. It's been a pleasure chatting with you about all things weekly beats and music and everything.
And thank you for having me. And I'm going to plug my album again. It's called The Pulsar Suite, and you can get it at neonliminal.bandcamp.com. And Autumn on Ganymede is there as well. And you will see cameos from various weekly beats people at different points.
Awesome.
It's been an incredible journey, Weekly Beats. I think, like in terms of my musical development as a musician and the people I've met, I don't think I've ever had a more productive year. So it's been really, really great. And this podcast, I think, is a fantastic way to like keep that connection going with people. And I think inspiring people, like listening to the people you've interviewed, like there's been things like I never would have thought of. And I'm like, okay, next year, I'm going to keep that in mind.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear, because I wanted to know some of these things as well. And I didn't expect to have this much of a community connection with the music making experience. So I kind of wanted to, I wanted to do something like this during the year, but that every time I thought about doing it felt impossible.
Oh, absolutely. Like this is,
I have some ideas for how to keep it going during a weekly beats year in a kind of different format that is way less work for me.
Yeah, that's important. Yeah.
It's been super cool just being able to focus on one person and their music, because as we all know, during the year, it's just like a scatter shot of like, I'm listening to like 100 songs or more. So it's been,
and it's only like halfway through the year that you have those people that you always go out to listen to, right?
Exactly. And then you kind of stick with some of them, and then you kind of lose some of the more exploration. So I've heard lots of comments already of people like, oh, I didn't even know about this person, and like super cool. Or I knew about this person, but I didn't listen to these songs.
And like, I think like this is a great bridge for the community, like between the years, like, you know, like seeing all the discussion on the Discord about the podcast, you know, like you can see people are like anticipating 2026 and you know, they're still making that community now. It's not like we're just sort of falling off and have to discover each other again. Like I think this is an important cornerstone to the Weekly Beats community. So congratulations on that, man. And
glad to hear that. I'm happy to do it, and maybe it'll lead to more collabs, and you know, it's just super cool to meet everyone.
It's been great. Yeah, cool.
All right, we're gonna play it on out with The Runner, Acid Daddy Live, and thanks everyone for listening and commenting on Discord and just participating in this show and Weekly Beats in general.
Cool.
All right, have a good one.
Take it easy.